The question of whether one can rob God by not tithing is both profound and challenging. It's a question that has stirred the hearts and minds of believers for generations, prompting deep reflection on the nature of giving, faith, and our relationship with the divine. At first glance, the idea might seem strange or even unsettling. How could a human being with all our limitations possibly rob the creator of the universe? Yet, this is exactly the question posed in the Bible, inviting us to look deeper. In the book of Malachi, chapter 3, God asks, "Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me in tithes and offerings." These words are not just a rebuke, but a call to self-examination. They challenge us to consider whether we are truly honoring God with what he has entrusted to us. The passage makes it clear that withholding tithes is not a minor oversight, but a serious matter. It's described as an act of robbing God. Not because God needs our money, but because tithing is a matter of the heart, a reflection of our trust and obedience. Tithing, according to Malachi, is far more than a financial transaction. It is a spiritual discipline, a tangible way to demonstrate our faith and commitment. When we give, we acknowledge that everything we have comes from God, and we return a portion as an act of worship. Verse 10 continues with a remarkable promise. "Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing." Here, God invites us to test his faithfulness, to see if he will not respond with abundance when we act in obedience. This invitation is unique in Scripture. Nowhere else does God so openly challenge his people to put him to the test. It's as if he's saying, "Trust me with your resources, and watch what I will do in your life." The act of tithing is deeply tied to blessings and trust in God's promises. It's not about earning favor, but about aligning our hearts with God's purposes and opening ourselves to receive what he longs to give. Many believers have shared testimonies of how faithful giving has transformed their lives, not just financially, but spiritually and emotionally. Tithing becomes a journey of faith, where dependence on God grows and gratitude deepens. By withholding tithes, believers not only disobey a command, but also close themselves off from the blessings that come with obedience. It's not just about money, it's about trust, surrender, and the willingness to let God be Lord over every area of our lives. When we hold back, we may feel a sense of lack or disappointment, missing out on the joy and peace that comes from generous living. The question then is not just about robbing God, but about what we are withholding from ourselves: peace, purpose, and the experience of God's provision. Ultimately, tithing is an invitation to participate in God's abundance, to trust him fully, and to experience the blessings that flow from a generous and obedient heart. God's concern with tithing is not because he needs money. In fact, the very idea that God, the creator of the universe, would require anything from us is a misunderstanding of his nature. God is all-sufficient, lacking nothing, and is not dependent on human wealth or resources. Instead, his focus is on our hearts and our willingness to trust him with what we have been given. The Bible tells us God owns the cattle upon 1,000 hills. He lacks nothing. Every resource, every blessing, and every possession ultimately belongs to him. This truth reminds us that our material wealth is temporary and entrusted to us for a purpose. God's ownership of all things is a foundation for understanding why he invites us to give. Tithing is a reflection of our priorities and where we place God in our lives. It's not just a routine or obligation, but a deliberate act of worship. When we choose to tithe, we are making a statement about what matters most to us, and we are intentionally putting God first in our finances. It's a spiritual exercise that aligns our resources with our faith, showing we value God above material wealth. Through tithing, we practice letting go of control and trusting God to provide for our needs. This act of faith helps us resist the temptation to make money our ultimate security or source of identity. When we tithe, we acknowledge that everything we have is a gift from God. Our homes, our jobs, our abilities, and even the smallest blessings are all evidence of his generosity. Tithing is a way to express gratitude, recognizing that we are stewards, not owners of what we possess. It challenges us to examine our hearts and attachments to worldly possessions. Are we clinging to our wealth, or are we willing to surrender it for a greater purpose? Tithing invites us to evaluate what truly holds our affection and to loosen our grip on the things of this world. By prioritizing tithing, we declare that God's kingdom is more important than our earthly treasures. We shift our focus from accumulating wealth to investing in things that have eternal value, like supporting the work of the church, helping those in need, and spreading hope. Tithing is a declaration of dependence on God, not just a financial act. It's a way of saying, God, I trust you to provide for me, and I want to honor you with what I have. This dependence deepens our relationship with Him and reminds us that our security is found in His faithfulness, not in our bank accounts. It ensures our faith is practical, influencing how we manage our resources. Tithing moves our beliefs from theory into action, shaping our daily decisions about spending, saving, and giving. It teaches us discipline, generosity, and a lifestyle of open-handedness. Tithing invites us to live with open hands and hearts, ready to give and receive according to God's will. It transforms our perspective on money, helping us see it as a tool for blessing others and advancing God's purposes rather than something to be hoarded. Ultimately, tithing is about aligning our lives with God's priorities and trusting Him to meet every need. Not tithing, as illustrated in the Bible, carries consequences beyond spiritual disobedience. It affects our relationship with God and our ability to receive His blessings. The Bible warns that withholding tithes reflects a lack of trust in God's promises. When believers choose not to tithe, they miss out on experiencing God's provision. Malachi promises blessings that overflow when we are faithful in our giving. By not participating in this act of faith, we close ourselves off to the abundance God desires for us. Neglecting this command hinders our spiritual development and the transformative power of generosity. Ultimately, the consequence is a diminished experience of God's grace and provision. Tithing has deep roots in the Old Testament, established as a commandment for the Israelites. Numbers outlines the directive for the Levites to receive tithes and present a tenth to the Lord. Leviticus emphasizes the tithe as holy, dedicated to God as an expression of gratitude. The commandment to tithe provided for religious leaders, supported the temple, and reminded people of their covenant with God. Tithing was an integral part of worship and communal life, reinforcing that everything belonged to God. This historical context demonstrates its significance in the life of the Israelites. The Old Testament commandments on tithing laid the foundation for understanding generosity in spiritual life. The transition from Old Testament law to the New Covenant marks a profound shift in how believers approach their relationship with God, especially when it comes to practices like tithing. In the Old Testament, tithing was a clear commandment, a part of the Mosaic law that required giving a tenth of one's income or produce as an act of obedience. This system was deeply rooted in the culture and religious life of ancient Israel, serving as a tangible way to honor God and support the work of the temple and the Levites. The book of Hebrews recounts the story of Abraham giving a tenth of his spoils to Melchizedek, a mysterious priest-king. This act, which predates the law of Moses, establishes a precedent for tithing as a heartfelt response to God's blessing and provision, rather than a mere legal obligation. Abraham's generosity was rooted in gratitude and reverence, setting an example for generations to come. Under the New Covenant, ushered in by Jesus Christ, believers are called to live under grace, not law. This means that our giving is no longer dictated by strict rules, but is instead inspired by the love and freedom found in Christ. The focus shifts from external compliance to internal transformation, where generosity flows naturally from a heart changed by God's grace. This shift redefines tithing in light of Christ's teachings, moving from obligation to voluntary generosity. Jesus emphasized the importance of giving with a cheerful and willing heart, encouraging his followers to support one another and meet the needs of the community. The New Covenant invites us to see tithing not as a burden, but as a joyful opportunity to participate in God's work. Abraham's tithe reminds us that tithing is ultimately a spiritual act of worship, not just a legal requirement. It is a way to express our trust in God's provision and our commitment to His mission. Through giving, we acknowledge that everything we have comes from Him and that we are stewards of His blessings. The New Covenant invites believers to embrace the spirit of tithing, guided by grace and love rather than compulsion. It encourages us to give freely, generously, and with gratitude, knowing that our offerings make a real difference in the lives of others and in the advancement of God's kingdom. The challenge for each of us is to integrate tithing into our lives in a way that truly honors God and supports His work in the world. By giving with open hands and open hearts, we become active participants in God's ongoing story of grace, generosity, and transformation. In the New Testament, giving shifts from obligation to heartfelt generosity. 2 Corinthians says, "He which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly. God loveth a cheerful giver." It's not the amount, but the spirit in which it is given that matters. God values a cheerful heart, willing to give generously and joyfully. Giving from the heart challenges believers to examine their motives. It transforms tithing from a transaction into a meaningful expression of faith. Believers are encouraged to cultivate a spirit of generosity that goes beyond material wealth. Giving from the heart becomes a way to participate in God's work, extending His love and grace. Humility is a key component of biblical giving. In Luke, Jesus tells of a Pharisee and a tax collector praying in the temple. The Pharisee boasts of his tithing, while the tax collector humbly asks for mercy. Jesus concludes, "He that humbleth himself shall be exalted." This parable underscores the importance of humility in giving and spiritual practices. Giving with humility means recognizing our offerings are a response to God's love, not a means to earn favor. Through humility, our giving becomes an act of worship centered on God. The New Testament emphasizes privacy in giving, as seen in Matthew. "Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them." Jesus encourages believers to give in secret, ensuring pure motives. This teaching highlights the value of sincerity and authenticity in giving. By giving privately, we demonstrate our commitment to God's values. Private giving protects us from pride and self-glorification. It allows us to maintain a pure heart and a genuine desire to serve. Our generosity should be rooted in love and faith, not external validation. By giving in secret, we align ourselves with God's heart, seeking His approval above all. Unlocking the power of tithing means understanding it's not about the amount, but the heart behind the giving. Both Old and New Testaments emphasize intention, humility, and sincerity. God calls us to give from the heart with joy and gratitude. Giving should be purposeful, humble, and private. These principles guide us to align our financial practices with our faith. It is not what we give, it is how we give.